Get some my bloody tits. Hello everybody and welcome to The United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this is your latest Manchester United news and transfer news as Gary Neville questions Erik Ten Hag's transfer policy and strategy. Not directly blaming Ten Hag, but the way the club have given another manager the freedom to do the transfers they want. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? We'll dissect that. He's also said that he doesn't think the players or Ten Hag are downing tools. He just questions whether the players are out of their depth, whether they're actually good enough. We've also got an update from Fabrizio Romano about a potential sale of Manchester United. Also a journalist in Bloomberg talking about a potential sale of Manchester United. My personal thought is that we will talk about it, and I do think that the Glazers will sell. But I think when you've had 3 losses in 5, and it's a Monday, and there's suddenly talk of a sale, the cynic in me says, this is bullshit. But we will talk about it, of course. Spin, 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 as Brian said. And also, I want to talk about how it's make or break for these players. There is no strategy to replace the 3 problem areas in this team. We've got to go with what we've got. And we'll talk about what I mean there in a moment too as well. But let's fly into it. Obviously, a lot of people have had their set. I mean, I tell you what, you can't move for people talking about the Glazers since yesterday. I've seen, Andy Goldstein on TalkSport, used to work at MUTV. Was he talking about the Glazers then? Don't know. Rio Ferdinand, I mean, I'm still lost in that video that Rio gave us at the train station 3 months ago that tomorrow we're going to get news about a sale. Gary's been talking about the Glazers as well. I don't know. I mean, have they just figured out the Glazers are bad for Manchester United? Bit of weird news actually today. Just a bit of weird news. Sale, Glazers aren't good for United. I'm sort of like, slow sports news. What's going on here? But some of the stuff that Gary Neville did come out with, I thought was very, 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 very interesting because if we start off with the first thing that he said, I'm trying to get some of this up on the screen for you as well. But basically, the one I wanted to start off with is this. I think this is a really, really interesting point that he makes. He says that previous managers, have all bought in who they wanted to bring in, transfers. I thought this time there would be a stronger sporting project behind the scenes that would enable Manchester United to bring in a group of players. But Manchester United have again allowed the manager to influence the signings, and that is my concern with the club. They've got no strength at the very top. So I know it's cut off a little bit of yours there, but that's what it says. So previous managers effectively have been allowed to do what they want in relation to bringing players in, and Gary thought that this time the club would be a bit stronger in the direction of the project. But again, they've let a manager do what he wants in relation to signings, and that's a concern. It's an interesting point because effectively, it's an interesting point because I don't actually have a problem with Erik Ten Hag being able to buy his own players. I think when you look at it, the manager has to be allowed to bring in the players that they want to bring in. And I think if they don't do that, then, I mean, are we going to... I know... Look, Pep Guardiola's got people above him. Edu works at Arsenal, and the ideal sweet spot is to have a director of football that works with Erik Ten Hag and does a good job and has experience and knows what the project of the football club is. So I think there's an element of what Gary is saying which I would agree with. A top class sporting director would be fantastic, but on the other hand, he also goes on to say that I never thought for 1 second that Man United would challenge Manchester City and Arsenal from the players that they bought in. That would have needed a Harry Kane type signing or a Declan Rice as an example. And they didn't have the money to do those types of signings. So Gary sort of contradicts himself, if you know what I mean, because he says the club have made mistakes letting Ten Hag buy the players that he wants to buy. But then in the same article or same podcast or whatever it was, he says, United would have needed a Kane and a Rice, but they couldn't afford to get those players. Kim Min-jae was a player that Ten Hag wanted, and they couldn't get him. They couldn't get De Jong last year. So I think there's a bit of a contradiction there, but it's an interesting point because I don't agree with it. I just agree with aspects of it that a director of football, a sporting director who knows what the project is, would be really, really good. John Murta does not strike me as a dynamic director of football that knows what he's on about. I'm sorry, I just don't think that. And Richard Arnold doesn't strike me as a CEO who knows what he's on about from a sporting project. And I think where Gary's struggling here, and I'm sure he'll say I'm not struggling, but he's not going to talk to me anyway, but where he's struggling is he's sort of getting a bit confused because he's sort of looking at Man City and Arsenal and the structure that they have at Arsenal and Liverpool and Man City, and he's saying United don't have that. And they've made a mistake letting a manager buy the players they want to buy again. But it's not Ten Hag who's making the mistake. A manager should be backed. So what are you saying, Gary? I think what you're saying is we need a sporting director and a project that works with the manager. But the way it comes across is that the manager should not be allowed to buy the players that they want. It should be up to the sporting director. Well, I don't know how long Gary's been in management or what he knows about management. I mean, he managed Valencia, but that's not good either. That's why that in that sense you end up with QATAR and PSG, where Pochettino, Tuchel, Ancelotti are basically given players and told to get on with it. That doesn't work either. It's probably the Chelsea model now. Here's £1 billion on players that we think, but not what the manager wants. So I don't think that's the way either. The sweet spot is a manager like Pep Guardiola working with a sporting director he knows and respects on a project where they both talk, discuss, agree and disagree. And that's what you want. Obviously, United do not have that. But I don't think this is correct. I don't think the way that reads to me is that, I hoped there was going to be a sporting project this year. But again, Man United have allowed a manager to buy who he wants, and that's a concern. But, let's read some of your comments. I'm honestly frustrated, says Barney. I know we haven't been playing well, but some of the stuff I've seen on FT and especially our own fans, it's obviously lots of people haven't played at a decent level, says Barney. Mark, I'm worried about people turning on Ten Hag. He's the best manager we have had since Fergie and needs the same time, says Thomas. Well, I'm not convinced. We'll go through some of Gary's comments. I'm not convinced he's totally up behind Ten Hag when you compare it to the way he spoke about Solskjaer. I don't think he is. I think he's a little bit of a drip effect of, I back the manager, but I don't like this. I back the manager, but I'm concerned about this. I back the manager, but Sancho and Maguire might be quite popular in the dressing room. I back the manager, but this, that, and the other. I mean, I think what we need from people like Gary Neville, who's a very vocal public face of Manchester United, is total and utter backing of the manager. He has made good signings. We've seen it before with these players, throwing managers under the bus. We need, that's what we had with Solskjaer. I don't think we're getting enough of that apart from the fans. And I'm passionate about that. This was written on the wall since Ten Hag arrived. Glazers pay him. He's not to be blamed. We are the club that crushes talent. Glazers destroyed us, says Ahmed. And I think some players treating their position like it's a job instead it's a privilege to play for Man United. They're just here for the paycheck, says Xander. And I agree with Thomas. I think that there is this danger that people will turn on Ten Hag. And Slow Sports News says, why should he not have the right to pick his players? If we have an incompetent board of directors, then why would he not? They're lazy and won't do it themselves, so they can pin it on him. And Glazers give the managers enough rope to hang them out to dry. They don't support him. They lynch him. The club is so mismanaged. What real choices does Ten Hag have, says Paul. Well, great comments there. Thanks for your super chats as ever. But my response personally is that, in relation to what Neville said there about, yet again, United have allowed a manager to pick their players and that's a mistake and it concerns him. I mean, it's a hypothetical mistake in a situation that doesn't exist. As I say, if you've got Man City set up, you don't just let Ten Hag buy everything he wants. But with Man United, you let Ten Hag buy everything he wants because you bloody don't want to listen to Richard Arnold or John Murta. So I actually think that Gary even mentioning, I find odd. Because letting Mourinho buy his players, letting Van Gaal buy his players, letting Ten Hag buy his players is infinitely better than John Murta saying no. I mean, effectively, Ten Hag came into this club a year ago. John Murta presented to him the players that they'd been scouting and he said, forget about it. Go and get me some players I know. And unfortunately, the same thing's happened a year later. They haven't got him the players that he wants, so he's ended up getting players that he knows. He wanted Harry Kane, he wanted Kim Min-jae, he wanted Declan Rice, he wanted Caicedo, and the club didn't have the money. So what does Ten Hag do? Well, what else have you got for me? No, I don't fancy that. Right, get me Højlund, get me Amrabat, I've used him before. Get me Onana, I've used him before. I don't think Ten Hag's done anything wrong in relation to his recruitment, and I'd question what the alternative should be when we don't have the sporting director. If we had Ralf Rangnick instead of John Murta, I think that would have been perfect. Rangnick's got the authority and experience as a sporting director to build a club from the top, and Ten Hag is a coach. They would have worked brilliantly together, but United screwed that up. And in that situation, Ralf Rangnick would say to Ten Hag, when he says Amrabat, Ralf Rangnick would say, I don't think he's the right profile of player for us, potentially. I think we should be looking at Lema at Bayern Munich, who is free. I think that's a better deal in relation to this project. Because Gary is right in one sense. You have always got to be looking at the future, and United haven't done this. And he is right on this. It's just the scenario isn't right. When you look at Manchester United and what Pogba did, what Mourinho did, and what Van Gaal did, and what Solskjaer did, they were given an amazing amount of money to buy the players that they felt suited their system. And what you end up with is what Ten Hag's got. He's got Maguire and Sancho, who are £80 million signings for Solskjaer. He's still got a couple of players that he probably doesn't want from the Van Gaal era. I mean, Martial would be one of those. But, yeah, so you have got to be looking a little bit more long-term in case this manager doesn't work. But you've also, to do that, you've got to have an identity. You've got to have an infrastructure. You've got to have a culture. We've got none of those things. So we literally have to do what we do. You get a manager in with a new philosophy and you back that philosophy. And that's just what we're set up to do. That's not a criticism of Ten Hag. Can't get on board with the Rashi hate. Hope Rashford doesn't start against Bayern just so we can see how pivotal he is, says Barney. I haven't really seen any Rashford hate. I just think that, as I said last night, Ten Hag needs to, coach him better to be, more like Saka or Salah, where it's a little bit more build-up play. Watched the United way today and nearly cried. People have died for this club and this is how the owners are treating it, says Reckon. And honest, if you are a young player, would you choose to play for United right now or Newcastle, Arsenal, even Brighton itself? They looked more stable than United, says Kirito. I mean, I love those questions because it's sort of shitting on United saying what player would want to come to United when literally Kudos chose West Ham over Brighton. These players, they ain't making fucking football decisions. They're making money decisions. Let's be honest. This self-righteous, who's going to want to play for United? Who's going to want to manage United? Come on. We've seen it for the last 10 years. We've bought people like Ronaldo, Pogba, Casemiro, Varane. I know it's just too self-righteous. Remember the sport you're operating in. A vast majority of footballers are mercenaries with agents who are mercenaries as well. I mean, if Kudus knew what was good for his career, he'd have gone and played for De Zerbi at Brighton. He's gone to play with Moyes at West Ham. So I don't agree with that. We're Manchester United. We're always going to attract players. Footballers are not like you. They're not like what's best for my career. They're about what's best for their project and what's a nice city a lot of the time. But that's not United's problem. What United's problem is to... well, look. This is what I was going to say. It's got to work with Ten Hag because I look at the three biggest issues that are being spoken about stereotypically by fans at the moment, right? I would say the top three issues that are being spoken about are the goalkeeper transformation, the Rashford issue in relation to not scoring enough goals and being a bit greedy and maybe, not that good in the press, and then the midfield being slow and not good enough. If those three things are fair, or if those three things are true, the scary thing is they all need to be resolved by Ten Hag because none of them are going to be sold. Rashford's just signed a new contract on £300 and something thousand a week. He's not going anywhere for it until he retires, let's be honest. Rashford's here till he's at least 30. So Rashford's not going anywhere. We've got to solve that issue if it is one. Onana's only just been bought. We have to stick with that. It has to work. So he's not going anywhere. And the midfield, well, the midfield's probably the scariest situation of all. Casemiro, if he is done, we are screwed. He's not getting any younger. We've just spent £60 million on him 12 months ago, so we can't sell him. Eriksen is getting older. He's not getting any younger, so we're not going to be able to sell him either. We just have to let him go. McTominay is 27, even though he thinks he's 22, because he's got some weird thing that no one else has got, where his actual age isn't his real age. Benjamin McTominay. And Amrabat, we've not even seen. Bruno obviously is the captain of the club. So every issue we've got in that team is not one that can be solved. Not sold, they've got to be solved. So whether you think Rashford's a problem, whether you think the midfield's a problem, whether you think Onana, the transformation is a problem, these are problems that Ten Hag has got to solve. They're not sellable issues. Issue with upper management is they overspend, leaving no room to get the right players. Eric Ten Hag wants, but also have managers wishes to get too many players in one window, destabilising the team and introducing too many parameters to manage, says Vish. I think you could have made that more succinct, but I think you made a good point. We need a top director that will challenge Eric, even though Mount was his top target. There are other positions that we needed more cover. I think that is absolutely spot on, Jose. That is where I would agree to a certain point in relation to what Neville was talking about. I just don't think it was worth putting out publicly because it makes it sound like, Ten Hag's making mistakes in the transfer window. I think Ten Hag is doing what he thinks is best because he's got nobody around him to advise him. I absolutely agree that the Mason Mount signing was a shock. And I think if you had a Ralph Rangnick there or a good sporting director, that's the sort of deal that you scrutinise. You don't necessarily stop it, but you probably sit them down and go, let's have a proper think about this, because I think £55 million for an attacking midfielder, I think there are far more urgent areas in your team, and that's a significant percentage of your budget. But we're nowhere near that at the moment, are we? We're nowhere near that. Luke Shaw is on his fourth manager. Just hope this bad form will make the Glazers sell at last, says Darren. We're going to talk about the sale in a moment. And what are your thoughts on Gary Neville saying there's a bug in the dressing room? Is he going to lose the dressing room? Says Marvin AM. Well, look, before we talk about the sale bit, let's just continue with a couple of Gary Neville points. I don't know about a bug in the dressing room because Neville spoke so much stuff today. It's hard to sell, it's hard to cover absolutely everything. But, what he did say, and I thought this was really interesting, is he said, in relation to the dressing room, Ten Hag will keep doing what he's doing, which is following his beliefs, his values and his principles, which is obviously what he's done with Sancho and Ronaldo and his discipline. The only thing I would say is, how popular is Sancho in the dressing room? How popular is Maguire in the dressing room? So what's Gary getting at there? Well, if he's not going to be completely blunt, the way I read that is, Ten Hag is going to live and die on his sword because, the players could turn against him if Jadon Sancho and Harry Maguire are popular in the dressing room and the results start going badly, as we've seen at this club. It happens at other clubs, but we've seen it happen at this club. When the dressing room gives up, it's not good for a manager. Mourinho, the dressing room turned on him. Solskjaer, they turned on him at the end. Rangnick, they never gave him a chance. So the last three managers have lost their jobs because the dressing room gave up. So we know that there is fundamentally still some players that were part of those. Some players were part of all of them, but some players have been part of two of them. Who may well turn on him. And I think it's interesting, again, when Gary starts mentioning how popular is Maguire in the dressing room, how popular is Sancho in the dressing room, like he doesn't know. We all know that the ex-players love the English players, and the reason they love the English players is because they've got a relationship with the English players. So he will know. He's a fan of Man United. He's not going to be there. He's not going to not be there on his WhatsApp, is he? Most of them follow him. He can drop a DM, slide into their DMs and go, what's going on? Some of them might tell him, some might not. I think, as I say, it's almost like a drip effect. And if Gary Neville is 100% behind Ten Hag, then I think he should start saying he's 100% behind Ten Hag. And he should start calling out the Sanchos of this world. Because I tell you what, if it was Solskjaer, he would be all over Sancho saying it's unacceptable. He's a guy who's been in the dressing room. I was talking to Ben Foster today about what it was like. You heard it at lunchtime, what it was like to be on the training ground at Man United when he was there. The discipline from the senior players with little things like if you left your bloody training top on the ground, someone would be like, who's done this? So Gary Neville knows about the discipline in the dressing room and he knows how important it is. If it was Solskjaer in charge, he'd be saying Sancho can't do that. He can't do that. But he's talking about popularity of Jadon Sancho. I couldn't give two shits about Jadon Sancho's popularity. He's outed the manager publicly and left a tweet up for a week. I'm telling you now, if that happened in Gary Neville's day, Roy Keane would rip their head off and shit down it. It's a fact. So, I don't want to hear about who's popular in the dressing room. The manager's in charge of the dressing room. Gary knows that when Sir Alex was there. So I don't want to hear about who's popular in the fucking dressing room. I want to hear our ex-players backing this manager publicly, the same way they did Sir Alex and the same way they did bloody Solskjaer. Just because you didn't have a relationship with Ten Hag doesn't mean you can't back a Manchester United manager who, let's be honest, has been thrown into a right shit situation. But we're getting stuff like, well, it depends how popular Harry Maguire is. It depends how popular Jadon Sancho is. Why? What prat in that dressing room is going to go against the manager because he gets on well with Jadon Sancho? Fuck off, lads. You paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a week to do a job for Manchester United. I couldn't give a shit if Jadon Sancho's your friend. You back your manager. That's what you're paid to do. You're in a privileged position to play for this football club. You put 100% in and you back your fucking manager. That's what you do. You don't start backing your mates in the dressing room. Do you think United fans want you to back your mates? They want you to play for your fucking club. Mark, you speak so much sense, which is why I watch the show every day, says Lee. Do you think Eric Ten Hag is playing tactics for a panic sell, says Tevin? I don't know what that means. I remember Keane and Fergie. Keane was out of the club and now nothing happens when you challenge the manager, says 499. No, it's a great point. It's a great point. I mean, Roy Keane was at the club for what? Must be 13 years. And he was basically the best captain the Premier League's ever had. He sat on an interview on MUTV. No one will ever get hold of that video again now. It's probably been deleted from history. And he basically was on MUTV watching a United game where we'd lost to Sunderland or Middlesbrough. And he'd been injured. And he was talking about it. And he basically slagged off a few players saying they're not fit to wear the shirt. The video got taken down. And Sir Alex basically bollocked him and says, you don't do that. And then he kicked him out of the club. Jadon Sancho's publicly tweeted about the manager. What would have happened in the Sir Alex days? When the whole world can see our issues in midfield, why can't Ten Hag see it? I completely back him, but can't fathom Mason Mount over a defensive midfielder, says SD. Well, look, you know, as I said, there are issues 100% for Eric Ten Hag to solve. Absolutely. But Gary Neville goes on to say, if you're talking about the best sporting operators in the country and in Europe, Manchester United don't have them. They just don't, and that's a concern. Talking about the sporting director. Also had to say this, and I must read this. He said, there is no Man United fan I know that has got a brain that is most angry with Eric Ten Hag. What they really want is change of ownership, and they want stability, and they want a group of players that are committed. I don't think the players aren't committed. I just don't think that some of them are good enough, is what the rest of it says. I think that's really interesting because he did actually say in his article about, you know, watching the players and you know, basically saying, you know, it's not that they're not committed. I just wonder how good they are, and that's my concern. Basically saying that some of these players are out of their depth at Manchester United. And he went on to say, what I'm hoping is that this moment is just a blip, a difficult start to the season, and it's not a repeat of what we've seen previously, where it becomes challenging for Mourinho or Van Gaal or Moyes, and obviously Rangnick and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Effectively, is it the beginning of the end? And that's what we're going to find out in the next few weeks. But look, there is a lot of truth in what he's saying there. There is definitely. I mean, I don't know what players he thinks aren't good enough, but I do think that we have got players at the club that aren't good enough. I mean, I was watching some of the Brighton play at the weekend this morning, and I mean, Scott McTominay and Eriksen were a waste of time. They're an absolute waste of time. In that diamond situation, they were basically having to go to the right and the left. They haven't got the legs to do it. They just haven't got the legs. I don't know what's wrong with the fitness of our team, by the way. They just don't have any legs this season, and it makes it ridiculously hard when you're up against teams that do have those legs. And we just don't have that. He also goes on to say we've got Gary Neville, who was Gary Neville says we've got Harry Maguire, who was captain of the team for 12 months. Who is now almost in some ways alienated and third, fourth or fifth choice centre-half. So he's got some situations there, and I don't know the damage that they are having. And I think this is again about dressing room unrest. And you know, we were talking about this in the summer. Harry Maguire wants to play for England in the Euros. Whatever the truth is about going to West Ham, he didn't go. Varane is meant to be back very, very, very soon. Jadon Sancho is a problem as well, as we know. Donny van der Beek is still there. So there's, you know, Scott McTominay stayed. There's 3 or 4 players at the club that just shouldn't be there, and they do create an issue on the training ground because they still maintain the relationships that they had last season. So look, I do worry about dressing room unrest because unfortunately these players have let us down in the past and they may well do it again. But I think what's so important is, and I haven't seen enough of it, what is so important is that if we're going to get through this, we've got to get ahead of the game. And in getting ahead of the game, you've got to realise that obviously the Glazers need to go and that the Richard Arnolds and John Murters of this world are not good enough. That's really important because they are the hierarchy. They are the people in charge, and that feeds downhill. That's why you don't get Kim Min-jae. That's why we are in debt. That's why we're not a well-run club. Those things are really, really important, and we've got to always be focused on that. But you've also got to be focused on the fact that there are problems within the club, and I want to see more vocality from Roy Keane, from Paul Scholes, from Gary Neville. I want to see them backing this manager like they backed Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because what we cannot do, and what so many of these gobby pundits who know nothing about this club but put Man United in their mouth for clicks and fucking, exposure. You know what I'm talking about. They've never played for Man United. They talk about us all the bloody time and they talk shit about us all the time. They need shutting down. And at the moment, it feels to me in the mainstream that they are sort of running this Ten Hag, it's the beginning of the end. And we need to see more from the Man United journalists and the ex-Man United players, because we're seeing it from the fans. They need to be more steadfast in their support for this manager. And I just sense that because they never wanted him in the first place, they're finding it difficult to get behind him. But we can't sack another manager. It's not what needs to happen next. The next thing has to be the sale. The next thing has to be the removal of the Glazers. Removing another manager is pointless. And yes, we know all these ex-players wanted Poch, but we got Ten Hag. I think it's so important that they get behind the manager because it symbolises what's the most important thing at United. I'm struggling to understand what Gary means when he said there's an issue with the manager picking the signings. Does he not know our scouts are useless because he acts like he knows everything, says Sean Turner. Well, it was a confusing message, yeah. And Kia said, while I'm excited about signing Mount as I was when we signed Maguire, not at all. Which CDM could we have bought with 55 million we paid for Mason Mount, says Kia? I mean, look, you weren't going to get Casido and you weren't going to get Declan Rice for 55 million, but there are plenty of centre defensive midfielders out there. I mean, Tonali was available for around that price as well. Sad to see my club in such a way. Coming from such high standards to this is depressing. Liverpool fans feel bad for us is worse than losing games, says Cameron. And Oscar says, hi, got robbed today in Dublin, chased him on foot for 30 minutes and called the Garda while running and they got him. Never give in, says me. You're a gent, Mark. You talk facts. We all appreciate you. Never give in. Oscar, that sounds very traumatic, especially in Dublin, my spiritual home in a sense. Crime is everywhere. And I'm glad you're okay, mate, and I'm glad they caught them. Martial's got no legs. Casemiro's legs have gone. Varane legs have gone. Eriksen never had any. Mount and Malice are injury prone. Sancho and Anthony out. And Shaw is out, says Tusher. It's a mess. It's a mess. And obviously we've got that game against Bayern Munich on Wednesday, which is going to be massive, absolutely massive. But I'll say what I said. I think whatever happens against Bayern Munich, and we'll preview that tomorrow afternoon, whatever happens against Bayern Munich, and I hope we can get a positive result, it's not really going to define what our season's about. I think in many ways, Burnley away on Saturday night is more important than Bayern Munich, because if we draw or lose to Bayern Munich, we've still got Bayern Munich at home, we've still got Copenhagen twice, and we've still got Galatasaray twice. We might have to finish second in the group to progress, but ultimately it's about progressing from the group. Losing to Bayern Munich doesn't mean you get the sack. That's ridiculous. We've got huge problems, but Burnley on Saturday, if we go and lose there, that's the sort of game, that's like what Solskjaer was doing, isn't it? Losing to Leicester and Watford. When we sell the club, we need to get in a director of football in ASAP, says Darren. And the problems are about some toxic players, not Ten Hag, Glazers out, says Desiree. Well, just going back to that director of football point as well. I know nobody wants Sir Jim Radcliffe to get hold of the club because he's going to work with the Glazers. But even Sir Jim Radcliffe wants a director of football because he's been linked to Paul Mitchell. So even the bid nobody wants realises we need a better CEO and a better director of football. So, Alan Murphy says, I hope Maguire never gets to play for this club again or play for England. He was captain and won't leave just for a bit of money, says Alan Murphy. Well, let's just talk about the sale for a moment, because there has been a couple of updates today. Fabrizio Romano has said that things are happening with the sale. Doesn't define what those things are, but things are happening. It's like being constipated, isn't it? And you start to feel like you might actually push one out. Well, it depends how long it's been. You don't want to push it out if it's been up there a while. And a bit too much information. And then there is a Bloomberg journalist that has come out, Bloomberg being a business aggregator. They've come out and said that there was never anything expected to happen between August and September in relation to the sale anyway. But into October, in the next few weeks, things are expected to start moving. And Qatar are still the hunch that they will get Manchester United. I mean, those updates aren't great. I mean, I love Romano, and Bloomberg are a reputable business outlet, but those updates to me are a little bit like, what am I getting for Christmas? Well, you're going to get something. You know, it's like, I don't really, you know, those updates to me like sound like holding updates. Something's going to happen with the sale. You know, what's going to happen with the sale? They're not going to sell. They are going to sell. They're going to half sell. They're going to get an investor in. Look, I'm a cynic when it comes to United because they are a PR machine and they are well known for spinning stuff out, especially when we're in a bad place. So 3 losses out of 5 is horrific. We might be selling the club. You know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this could just be spin to try and make the fan. It's the old classic. You get beat and then a newspaper article comes out saying we're going to try and sign Ronaldo or Gareth Bale. It's a classic tactic to manipulate the fan base. Whether it is or not, I don't know. But I you know, the thing is about the sale is something will happen with the sale. Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I think these people who think that the Glazers are just going to stay completely don't understand the situation with the club. They are not staying in their current guise. They cannot stay with the ownership they have at the moment. It's unsustainable. Like, there is no money. They have to sell in some way, shape or form. So they will. Now, whether it's a complete sale to probably Qatar or whether it's a partial sale to Sir Jim, let's wait and see. And it will happen at some point, but when it's going to happen, I don't know. I often think as well, why hasn't anybody else come in? Because United have never closed the door on anybody else. I do wonder why nobody else has come in. Hi, Mark. Just watching the Luton versus Nottingham Forest match. I think it's Burnley. Their winger is playing great. What's your thoughts about him? I think it's the Burnley winger, isn't it, Balwinder? Yeah, it does look good. I'm not watching it at the moment, though. Charlie, welcome to the Members Club. Thank you very much. And one silver lining is Poch is busy doing rubbish at Chelsea rather than be there hovering in the background to take over like Jose was for Van House's Glenny boy. Well, look, I don't take any satisfaction in Chelsea being crap. I don't really care. I mean, as long as they're below us, that's all that's all that bothers me as a Man United fan. But I mean, I suppose there is a little bit of justification. I don't think Pochettino was the answer for Manchester United. And I think already he's shown that he's not a bloody miracle worker like some people thought he was. A lot of the ex-players and a lot of the media wanted Pochettino because of previous relationships. They wanted Pochettino because they probably had his number on WhatsApp. They wanted Pochettino because he'd been in the Sky Studios. They wanted Pochettino because he'd played the game in England before and what a nice guy he was for a foreigner and all this shit. And I'm like, you know, they didn't want Ten Hag because they didn't know who he was. And they don't have a relationship with him. But Ten Hag was always the better choice over Pochettino. And Pochettino at Chelsea is actually showing what he'd have done at Man United. You know, well, actually at Chelsea it's a different problem. It's like, how do I get all these millionaires into my team? But at Man United it would have been inheriting what was left after Ollie. I don't think Poch would have been able to do anything with our team because a year down the line, Erik Ten Hag hasn't got us playing good football. You look at his Ajax team, it was brilliant. He hasn't got us playing good football. But there is also those fans in this fan base who think and ridiculously go, well, look at what Ange's done in such short a period of time with Spurs. They're playing good football. Why is Ten Hag not doing it after a year? Look at De Zerbi at Brighton. He's got them playing good football. He's been there less time than Ten Hag. And you go, come on. Do not compare Spurs and Brighton to Manchester United. Now, I think what Ange is doing at Spurs is good, but, you know, we should have beat them at Spurs. We should have beat them. We should have been 2-0 up at half-time. And they haven't really played anybody that good yet. And it's a good new manager bounce. Brighton played good football under Potter. Brighton have got an identity. there ain't no manager. Let's say Pep Guardiola himself. Pep Guardiola, with 12 months with this United team, is not going to get it playing like he got Man City playing. Because they ain't got the money to do it. He wouldn't be given the money to do it, and he wouldn't have the sales to do it either. Pep Guardiola can come in and go, get rid of that goalkeeper, get rid of that right back, buy me this goalkeeper, buy me that right back. I don't like them either. Get rid of that goalkeeper, get rid of that right back. That's how it works. That's how it should work. If you want a project, you've got to give a manager the right to do it. But how can you build a project when Eric Ten Hag says, get rid of Maguire, get rid of McTominay, get rid of Sancho, get rid of Martial, get rid of Donny? Oh, they're all here for another season. Okay. How can I move forward when you won't move the players out that I don't think are part of the project? And that's always the problem at United. And Mourinho had it, and Van Gaal had it, and Solskjaer probably had it as well. He just smiled about it. Like, every manager at United has hit the same brick wall. You cannot sell the players that need to be sold because we're shit at selling. So they have to stay, and they have to be part of the plan. Well, Klopp doesn't have to put up with that. Arteta doesn't have to put up with that. And Pep doesn't have to put up with that. Even Arteta has been given authority to get rid of the Ozils and the Aubameyangs and the Kolasinac. If you don't want them here, you get rid of them. Man United have never learnt that lesson. And, I mean, it's too intellectual for the mainstream to discuss. Give them a couple of weeks. But you are intelligent enough to understand it. Everyone talks about how much money gets spent. Everyone talks about the style of football. Everyone talks about, Ten Hag's got to be under pressure. But they miss the most important fundamental when comparing to clubs that are successful or on the path to being successful. When you look at Arsenal, when you look at Man City, when you look at Newcastle, and when you look at Liverpool, what have they all got in common? If they don't want a player, the player is out the door. And it doesn't matter who they are, whether it's Coutinho, whether it's Cancelo, whether it's Aubameyang, they're out the door. And they're not always that high profile. They can be, 4 or 5 players that are squad players, whatever. They're out the door. And you know why that happens? Because the owners and the sporting directors have a vision where they go, it's not genius, it's just common sense. They go, this manager has told me that these players are a problem. They're either not good enough or they're not, mentally strong enough, whatever. I have to remove those problems because a problem in the team will cause a problem on the pitch. Morale, ability, whatever. So if a manager says to me these players are a problem, my job is to get them out. And that's what other clubs do. But at Man United, Mourinho's done it. As I said, Van Gaal did it. I'm sure Ten Hag's done it. We've just seen it this summer. These players are a problem in my vision. Yeah, we can't get rid of them. And that's huge. That's absolutely huge because we're the only club that will not remove the problems. And people will say, well, what about Ronaldo? Ronaldo fell out with the manager and Ronaldo forced the move. Ten Hag wanted to keep Ronaldo for the rest of the season. It was Ronaldo who got that move by doing that interview. People will say about De Gea. De Gea was out of contract. I mean, I'd like to get rid of De Gea. Oh, might be a bit tough, but we'll do our best to do it. He's out of contract, yes. Eric Ten Hag probably overestimated his squad and wants to change things too soon after season 1. Anada could have waited so we could fill other positions, says Varron. But it is massive, and it doesn't get discussed enough. And it's not just a Ten Hag thing. It's happened with previous United managers when you think about the likes of Rojo, Pogba. There's been loads of players that stayed too long when managers had highlighted them as problems and the club said, no, we can't get rid of them. Or we don't want to get rid of them. I mean, look, Mourinho wanted Martial and Pogba gone, and the club said no. Rightly or wrongly, at that time, I didn't want Martial to go. But look, the manager has to be allowed to get rid of the players, and they don't. And I suppose that contradicts what Gary says, really, because he says, oh, another manager's come in and they let him sign who he likes, and that's a mistake. But they don't let him sell who he likes, Gary, do they? So, yeah, massive problem. Massive problem. And Alex says, Arteta finished 8th in his first 2 seasons. Klopp couldn't break 4th for 3 seasons. Eric Ten Hag gets 3rd and a trophy in his first season and somehow is facing this level of criticism. It's embarrassing, says Alec. It's a great point, Alec. And you know what the problem is? One, Man United is the problem. No other ex-player or mainstream outlet talks about any other club more than they talk about Man United. No other club has strangers sticking their fucking nose up our arse than Man United. And that's why Man United are always under the microscope. I don't mind our Man United journalists or our ex-players, certainly the fans, talking about our club because they're educated on it. They might be wrong, they might have an agenda, but they're educated on it. But the problem with Man United is you'll get Carragher, you'll get Shearer, you'll get bloody, I don't know, O'Hara or, you know, Darren Bent, whatever. They'll stick the nose in on Man United on a daily basis, even though they're not United fans, they don't support United, they've never played for Man United, and they don't know what we're all about. But they stick their gob in on Man United every day. I was driving over this morning to Ben Foster's place. I had the radio on. Andy Townsend, Ali McCoy, Man United, Man United, Man United, Man United. It's all Man United. And that leads to pressure on the manager. And that's why it's our job, our Man United journalist job, and our Man United ex-players job, to put aside whatever their feelings about Ten Hag were at the start and actually get behind him. Because you know what? It's not fair. They're all moaning last week that it's not fair that Harry Maguire gets booed. Well, it's not fair the way Ten Hag is being targeted at the moment compared to, like you just said, there are other managers that have had, you know, an average first couple of years as they try and build something. I mean, Arteta's first couple of years weren't great. He won an FA Cup, but they weren't great league position-wise. Eric Ten Hag took us to an FA Cup final. He's won the Carabao Cup and he finished third. That's a better first season than Arteta, and I could see what Arteta was building, even if some Arsenal fans didn't want to. Marzi, welcome to the Members Club. And do you think Ten Hag is slowly starting to publicly shame players to force their exit as we can't sell, says Daniels? Look, I think there's a mess going on at Manchester United. But unfortunately in football, and I know this for a fact, every day these people have to justify their existence. And they'll contradict themselves week on week. You know, they'll do a newspaper article saying this about Ten Hag and that about Ten Hag, and he's under pressure. And I mean, look, a collection of some of the stuff I've seen this week is you can't blame the Glazers, you've got to blame Ten Hag. Ten Hag's not improved any player at Manchester United. I mean, look, that's disgusting, right? Tim Sherwood is on Sky Sports, right? And he's on Sky Sports on Saturday afternoon. I mean, nobody really watches it anymore, so we don't need to worry about it too much. But it is still mainstream media. And he sat there saying that Eric Ten Hag hasn't improved one player at Manchester United. And I think, you know what? That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible that somebody has not got in his ear. Well, even better, somebody's not send security in, one arm each, and throw him out. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the Ferocious says, what player has he improved? And I sort of, you know, the head goes down, and I think, my God, we've been infiltrated by an idiot. Or maybe it's the Tim Sherwood fan club. What do you mean, what player has Eric Ten Hag improved? And this is the problem in football. Unfortunately, small-minded people have short memories. We've lost 3 games out of 5. It's a really bad start to the season. But last season was a 38-game season in the Premier League, and we obviously played a lot of cup games. We finished 3rd, and we got to 2 cup finals. But people don't remember that. They're only thinking about the first 5 games of the season. You can twist, you can turn, you can lie, you can do whatever you like, but the history books say last season was a ridiculously successful season for United, comparable to most seasons in the last decade. You could argue that last season is one of our best we've had since Sir Alex Ferguson retired. So when these people say that Eric Ten Hag hasn't improved anybody, how the fuck did he get to 2 cup finals and finish 3rd then? What did he do? Just sit on his arse knitting? Like, it's crazy. But this is the world we live in, especially in relation to the mainstream, who just spurt verbal diarrhea over the masses and do literally no research, but just let their agenda about Man United spew out. And to say, this is the problem. The pressure doesn't come from the fan base. The pressure comes from the external people who can't keep Man United out their mouth, but even more dangerously, are uneducated on Man United. They come out with stupid stuff like, you can't blame the Glazers for Man United losing against Brighton. What do you mean you can't fucking blame the Glazers for losing to Brighton? So we can't blame the Glazers for any defeat. We can't blame the Glazers for the fact that over the last 7 or 8 years, we've consistently been put on our arse by Liverpool, by Man City, by Brighton, by Newcastle, by Leicester, by Watford. What do you mean you can't blame the bloody Glazers? You absolute twats. Like, this is not a one-off. We consistently get beat every single year, way before Ten Hag. What do you mean we can't blame the bloody Glazers? We're in this position because of the bloody Glazers. But what it is they're just thick. They've got no concept of the fact is, if I own a restaurant and I serve up a turd instead of chocolate mousse, you can't blame the waiter for delivering it. You blame the person who shat on the plate and did it on purpose. And that's the Glazers, the owner of the bloody restaurant. So, look, this is the big problem. And this is why we as a fan base, and we need our ex-players and we need our journalists to get behind this manager, because it is a witch hunt. And really, the witch hunt comes from the fact that Tim Sherwood don't want to talk about Spurs or Norwich or Blackburn because no one gives a shit. He wants to talk about Man United because he can, and this is what people need to realise. All these ex-players, all these journalists that don't support Man United can't shut up about Man United and talking about us in a negative way because they might go viral. They might get another job on Sky. They might get a better clip. They might get a better job. They ain't talking about bloody Everton or anyone else. They're talking about Man United and they're talking out their arse. And that puts pressure onto Ten Hag. And this, is the same thing that happened with Mourinho. Ultimately, Mourinho did deserve the sack, but there was a lot of people with knives out for Mourinho a lot earlier than the majority. We always seem to do everything a year later than we should. Example, what did a year on loan for Tellez and Bay's value? It's never going to happen, says Glenny Boy. Zane has better football opinions than Tim Sherwood, says Glenn, 100%. And couldn't put it better myself, you legend, says Kieran. Well, it needs calling out for what it is. Because tomorrow we'll wake up and some irrelevant ex-player who doesn't even watch the game anymore will be talking out their arse about Man United. Oh, he's got to be under pressure. Of course he's got to be under pressure. Man United's one of the biggest clubs in the world. He's lost 3 out of 5. They're playing bad football. I love Jadon Sancho. Harry Maguire should be starting for them. Scott McTominay should be playing up front. Oh, he's got to be under pressure. He doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, he's got to be under pressure. And so the pressure builds, but it's built from an area that we should just be completely bloody ignoring. They're irrelevant. They don't bloody support the club and they've got no idea what's going on at the club. I really truly believe once we finally get Amrabat and Maino into the team, that should get going. Look, SK, there's nothing that's going to give me more satisfaction if we can bounce back from this. I mean, we were never winning the league this year anyway. And what's second place? I mean, to be honest with you, you can piss off, get out. I mean, second place, we've done it before with Solskjaer, we've done it with Mourinho. It meant fuck all. If we qualify for the Champions League, we qualify for the Champions League. And hopefully we get rid of the Glazers and maybe next year we can start building properly because that summer was nowhere near good enough. But going back to what I said, I actually saw somebody in the chat say, Tim Sherwood's right, he's not improved anybody. Right, this is the easiest bit I've ever done in 10 years doing the United Stand. Right, Marcus Rashford, I sat here at the end of the season of Solskjaer and Rangnick and said, Rashford's done at Man United. He doesn't look interested. He's playing terribly. It's the best thing for him is to go because I can't see him turning it around. And that's what I said. Within 3 months with Eric Ten Hag, it was like a new Marcus Rashford. That's number one player that Eric Ten Hag completely and utterly saw and went, I'm going to turn him around. So Marcus Rashford's one. Aaron Wan-Bissaka was out of the team completely. He was going to be sold. He's another one. Victor Lindelof was, Lindelof's biggest claim to fame was Magaluf. He was the Pratt next to Maguire who was, not good enough. Now, he's actually established in his own right as our third choice centre-back who gets to play a lot. So Lindelof is another one as well. I genuinely think that players like, and I'm not even including his new signings who I think have been very good. Casemiro, Martinez, Anthony a bit up and down. I agree. But Dalot for half of the season last year was fantastic. I think the big problem with Ten Hag's improvement of players is that people have short memories and they will go, well, Rashford's rubbish now. Martinez is rubbish now. Casemiro is rubbish now. Wan-Bissaka's injured now. And people have this recency obsession that they cannot look back to last year and say for a whole season, those players were brilliant. The big problem Man United have at the moment is that a lot of the players that Eric Ten Hag improved have now taken a step back. And they've taken a step back because of fatigue. They're knackered. They played so much football last year with little cover that a lot of these players are burnt out. And, you know, again, people have short memories. There is a prime example of this, and it's called Liverpool. Liverpool last season started their season like we have started our season. Football's full of evidence. Liverpool had a really good season. They got to every cup final, got to the Champions League final, lost, good, and they nearly won the league. Man City won it. The start of last season, they were knackered. Fatigue, mentally, they had no energy. I've watched United this year. It reminds me of Liverpool at the start of last year. It's inexplicable. We've got a lot of the same players and we've got the same manager, but we've got no energy and we've got no chemistry, and it makes no sense. But Liverpool started last season exactly the same, with the likes of Mo Salah, with the likes of Andy Robertson and Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold and Alisson. They started last season dreadfully. And the reason they did that is because they were absolutely knackered from the season before. And I think United are going through the same thing. I think United players are inexplicably knackered. But that doesn't change the fact that Erik Ten Hag has improved massively, probably 4 or 5 players. And, you know, he's improved. I mean, Luke Shaw's improved under Ten Hag. Bruno's improved under Ten Hag. They were already good players, but they have improved. I mean, look at Luke Shaw at left centre-back last season. When have we ever seen Luke Shaw playing like that at left centre-back? But, oh, hold on a minute. That doesn't work because the mainstream and everybody that wants to hate on us only wants to talk about the last 5 weeks. Erik Ten Hag's only been here 5 weeks, according to them. But you know what? Luke Shaw was one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League last year. We've never really seen him play there consistently. Who do you think got him to play there? Who do you think made him a better left-sided centre-back? Santa Claus? No. But this is it. Short-term memories. People don't want to acknowledge the fact that we did well last season and that actually 5 Premier League games this season is less than 10% of what Ten Hag has done altogether. So, you know, I just think we've got to back the manager. And I do sense a drip effect. You know, I don't know how to take what Neville said. It doesn't feel completely behind Ten Hag, even though he sort of says he is. I think there's enough. I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about that. As we know, the mainstream non-United media are just constantly got their knives out. And the thing is as well, if you're a long-term viewer of the United Stand, we literally said this when he first got the job. We said it in the summer before we'd even played a game. And we've said it countless times over the last 12 months. We've actually had this conversation that when there is a glimpse or a sniff of something going wrong with Ten Hag, those knives are going to be really close. And that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing, 100%. They were always going to do this because, let's be blunt, was there an overarching hallelujah, Man United have got Erik Ten Hag as manager when he was announced? No. The mainstream didn't want us to get Ten Hag. They weren't excited about it. The fan base was excited. It was our choice. But you remember when United got Mourinho, there was a fanfare. Oh, Mourinho's got the job. When Solskjaer got the job, oh, it's great, giving a legend of the club the job. But Ten Hag, it was sort of like, we were excited. So, look, they're out for him. They're out for him, and it's our job to protect him. Erik Ten Hag is yet to get his signings on the pitch at once, says Andy. Look, I'm looking forward to Bayern Munich on Wednesday night, but my opinion is my opinion, your opinion is your opinion. I really don't think our season starts until on Saturday. That's where it starts. That's where it could go wrong. Because I look at that Bayern Munich game and I think it's a free hit. I think it's a hard game, even if we're top of the league in the Premier League. I think that going to Bayern Munich is a tough game. But we've got Burnley away on Saturday. Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup, couldn't give a shit. We've got Burnley away on Saturday. Then we've got Palace at home. And then we've got Brentford at home before the next international break. We've got to take 9 points from the next 3 Premier League games. And then after the international break, we've got Sheffield United away before we play Man City. So I'm looking at the next 4 games and I'm going, we win the next 4 games against Burnley, against Palace, against Brentford and Sheffield United. And we're back on track. And on track for us is going to be 4th place this season. That's what we're going to have to try and go for. Anything else is a bonus. But if we can't beat Burnley, Palace, Brentford and whoever the else is, then we're going to be in problems, aren't we? And it's not easy. You know, Brentford are a good team, Palace are a good team, but that's where it starts. Mark, sorry to nag, but what's your news on Cardiff show, says Matthew. We have got a new show being announced very soon, so keep your ears open for that. Can I just say as well, Goldbridge Saves Football podcast out tomorrow. I've recorded it today. It's all edited and ready to go. It's going to land early tomorrow. Normally it comes out at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, but it's out at 7 a.m. tomorrow. So if you're getting up to go to school, the gym or work, you can listen to this week's podcast at 7 a.m. It'll be out. Links in the live chat. Make sure you give us a follow and turn your notifications on Spotify or iTunes. It's out at 7 o'clock tomorrow. The reasons it's out at 7 o'clock tomorrow is because the Champions League is back, and there is a big section in the podcast about the new Champions League format where I absolutely explain it and lose my shit. So it'll be a good listen for you tomorrow on the way to work or school, or maybe you don't work. Maybe you're unemployed, or maybe you're retired, or maybe you can't be arsed. Listen to it in bed with a cup of tea. But yeah, make sure you give the podcast a follow because it's out for a special early one tomorrow at 7 a.m. instead of the normal 2 p.m. And yeah, it's a good one. I enjoyed it this week. And yeah, definitely. Luke is in unemployed. I've been in unemployed before. Don't sweat it. And I'll be back on the 10 o'clock show as well. So yeah, make sure you give that podcast a follow. Links in the live chat. Goldbridge Saves Football. Cracking show tonight. You know what? I like these shows. We end up with the hardcore now. Through the summer, you have everybody just talking about, oh, we're going to sign this Roma midfielder. And as much as it's enjoyable, I actually enjoy these shows more. I like talking about the politics of the club, how we improve. These are the hardcore shows for me. I love these shows. Thanks everyone. Last couple of 8 o'clock shows have been brilliant. I really enjoyed them. Thank you. As I say, podcast's out at 7 o'clock. Give us a follow. Goldbridge Saves Football. Links in the chat. Take care, everyone. I'll speak to you soon. We've also got the Bayern Munich preview tomorrow as well, which I'm looking forward to. You're all bloody legends. Take care.